Hello, my wonderful, beautiful friends, guys. Welcome back to our /MaliciousCompliance, where people follow orders to spite someone. And in today's episode, it's all about bad bosses getting taught lessons they won't forget. And OP obeys orders only to have her boss regret it big time. Guys, I hope you enjoy the stories. Don't shake your heads too hard. And as always, you can send or link your post to this email right here. Let's dive in. So many years ago, I got a job working in a retail store. This store and two others were owned by a young couple and another woman. I worked there happily for about a year and became very good at my job, which included reminding owners when stock needed replacing, merchandising, etc. At one point, we lost a few staff in rapid succession, leaving myself and my friend as the only long-term staff. Then, my friend was offered a manager position with one of our competitors, so she left as well. This left me to train all the new staff, run the floor, deal with vendors, place orders, do pricing, basically manage the store. So I approached the owners about being named the new manager, since I was doing the job just without the pay or title for several months. They said that sounds great, but we'd like you to do a management course before we make it official. But before you do that, can you wait a couple of months until all the new staff have been trained? Now, I naively agreed to this, thinking long-term it would be to my benefit. Now, during the waiting time, one of the new staff got very chummy with the owners. She had never worked retail before, and she wasn't particularly good at the job, but she was super friendly to them. The next thing I know, they have appointed her as the new manager. Needless to say, I did not take this news particularly well, especially considering that she was constantly asking me how to do things. Let's just say my attitude towards work changed drastically. I no longer gave a care in the world. If the stock was getting low, not my job. Next week's timesheet hasn't been done, not my job. I still performed all of the tasks I was paid to do, and all of my customers loved me, but I stopped doing any extra work. So then I get dragged into the owner's office for a meeting. The owner says to me, "So we've noticed that your attitude has changed. You aren't going above and beyond anymore, and we expect that of all of our staff, blah blah blah. So with that, we would like to give you the next 2 days off to think about why you want to continue to work here, and we would like it in writing." Before I'd even walked out, I knew I was going to be resigning. I went home, talked to my husband, and he agreed that I should just quit. So I took my 2 paid days off to spend time with my family and get a new job. When I went back into work, I was greeted with smiles, and they eagerly took the piece of paper I handed them. The look on their faces dropped to shock when they realized what they were reading was my resignation, and not the letter of how much I loved working there and all the reasons I wanted to stay. It was priceless. I worked my 2 weeks' notice and happily left to greener pastures at my new job. Less than a year later, their store just closed down, so I guess their choice of manager did not go so well. Honestly, I don't know what the owners were expecting, guys. Like putting your best employee in a timeout and expecting them to write an essay on why they love the place and want to continue working there. Like, thank goodness OP quit, right, and moved on, because clearly the owners had no idea what they were doing. And this is exactly what happens when people take employees for granted. People have breaking points, and the owners learned a hard lesson. So I was working at a locally owned cell phone repair store, and although I was the only person at this location who had any knowledge of phones, the owner's sister had been given the title of manager. And here's a little background on the owner's sister, who we'll call Meg. Meg was 37 at the time, and she had never moved out of her parents' house. I had talked to her about this before, and it goes way beyond what you might be thinking. She had never done her own laundry, didn't know how to cook, she had only just gotten her license to drive a couple of years prior, and the idea of moving out stressed her because she didn't know how bills worked or who to call if she got hurt. You get the idea, right? She had also been fired from every single job she had. With that said, despite being a manager at a cell phone repair store, she could not tell the difference between the latest iPhone and one from like 10 years ago. This woman made rocks look smart. Anyways, on to the malicious compliance. Since she wasn't the brightest, she often made mistakes when giving people quotes or information on the phone, and I would do my best to quietly give her the correct info. Now, sometimes she was grateful for the help, but other times she would shush me, telling me that she was the boss. Well, one day it was really bad, and she kept giving out inaccurate information, which was costing us repairs because people would drive to the store, and I would give them the actual price, which was different from what they heard on the phone. They assumed bait and switch, and oftentimes I would be yelled at. but really, it was just ignorance on Meg's part. I admit I was probably a little angry with her, and that may have come across in my tone, despite how patient I was trying to be. I corrected her once again on the info she was giving over the phone, and she just snapped at me. She hung up the phone and starts screaming at me to never interrupt her again if I want to keep my job. Well, about half an hour later, she got a phone call on her cell phone. She looked confused, but that was nothing new. I wasn't too concerned until I saw her rummaging through her purse while talking to this person. I then heard her tell the person on the phone, "Give me a moment, I know my social security card's in here somewhere." Hearing that, I tried to get her attention because usually nobody would call and ask for that information, but she just glared daggers at me, so I sat back down and shut up. She then pulls out her social security card and gave them the number. This phone call lasted close to half an hour. She then proceeded to give them her current address, her past address, her credit card number, her password, her PIN. She even spelled out her name for them and even gave them her home phone number. Meanwhile, I quietly sat through all of this and I just kept working on the phone I was repairing. When she finally got off the phone, she turns to me and says, "Well, that was a weird phone call. AT&T needed to verify all my information for some reason." That's when I said to her, "Why is that weird?" To which she responds, "Well, I have T-Mobile, I'm not with AT&T." And hearing that, my jaw dropped. Like, I knew she was stupid, but this was the moment I really understood that. I then told her that she needs to call her brother because her identity had just been given away on a silver platter. She was now crying, and then she says to me, "He's gonna be so upset. My identity has already been stolen twice this year." So yeah, that girl was my boss, the manager of the store I worked at. Holy cow, guys, like, how does she manage day-to-day life? And honestly, I know she's family and all, but sometimes you gotta draw the line somewhere, because if she's just giving away her personal information like that, who knows what else she could mess up by being the manager of the store. A long time ago, and I mean something like 35 plus years, I was a little troublemaker. I was around 14 or 15 at the time, with a bit of a smart-ass attitude, and I worked at the local pizza place. My manager was young, she was like 18 or 19 at the time, and my team would get high and drunk with her after work, and typically just hung out and partied all the time at her apartment. Well, the owner decided that she was a little too young to be the manager, so he demotes her to assistant and he hires a new manager, who we'll call Mr. Smith. Mr. Smith ended the employee discount for food and ended our perk of getting to eat messed up orders because he thought we messed them up all the time on purpose to get free food. Plus, he liked to eat anchovies right out of the can, which was gross. So he was all around not very popular with the kids on staff, including me. Another rule he put in place was that during our breaks, we could not sit at any of the tables in the dining area, unless we were eating something. But he never specified what we had to eat. Cue the malicious compliance. So at this point in history, another pizza chain that was famous for avoiding the Noid opened up a test pizza delivery place called Pizza Dispatch. This was a test to see if people would still like the pizza under a different name. The pizzas were 100% the same. The ingredients even had the original chain's name on the boxes. So one night during a really busy shift, I was told to go on break in 15 minutes. So I went to the payphone and called up Pizza Dispatch. They took my order and didn't believe that I wanted it delivered to a different pizza place. But after I explained the situation, they were game. The guy probably didn't believe me still, but they delivered. They even expedited it for me. So 15 minutes go by, and I go on break. I just sit in the closet that we had for a break area, until I hear Mr. Smith ask, "What the hell are you doing in here?" The delivery guy reaches into his bag and said, "I have a delivery for Jacob." That's when I stepped out and said, "That's me." Under the blistering stare of Mr. Smith. I paid for the pizza, gave a very healthy tip for the speed, then went and sat down at a dining room table, and then opened my box of pizza as Mr. Smith came up and tried to make me eat somewhere else. That's when I said, "You said that we could only sit in the dining room on our breaks if we were eating. You bring your lunch every day, so today I brought mine." He got pretty mad that I ordered pizza from a different franchise, but I didn't push him far enough to get fired. But what did happen is the employees got the discount back, we were able to eat messed up orders, and Mr. Smith ends up teaching me a lot about work ethic, how to run a small business, complete inventory, and compute the profit and loss statement each month. This was in the mid-80s, so we didn't have computers in the stores. We did it all on paper. I ended up working for him the entire time he was a manager at our small restaurant, and I even followed him to another chain later on. I still think about him and the lessons he taught me from time to time. While he wasn't a great manager at the beginning, he ends up being a great leader and a mentor. You know, this post started off rough with Mr. Smith laying down the new rules, but who would have thought that he'd turn out to be a good guy, and the post being such a heartwarming tale. Like, I just love how he was basically like, you little punk, let's just be allies. And this person comments, Mr. Smith was a smart man. If you just yell and complain about your smartass employees, they'll never respect you, try to bend every rule to the breaking point, and probably quit as soon as they get a better offer, or just get tired of taking it. If you take them under your wing and maybe give them some wiggle room instead, they will probably end up respecting you and be more loyal in the end. Yep, definitely sounds like Mr. Smith was onto something. This happened way back in the 90s when I had a night job as a computer operator on a mainframe. Our company relocated to a neighboring state over a weekend, and I was scheduled to work Saturday and Sunday nights, 12 hours each, and have off Friday. I was told to call Friday at 6 p.m. for directions to the new place while I was there. I didn't know how to get there from where I lived. Since I wasn't scheduled on Friday, I ran the errands that I would do on the weekend because of the schedule, and at 6 p.m. I called. The conversation went like this. I basically said, "Hello boss, I'm calling to get directions to the new building." Boss says, "Good." He then gave me directions and he said he'll see me in 1 hour. I say to him, I'm not scheduled today and I haven't been to sleep yet as I wasn't supposed to be there. Boss tells me, plans changed. Sorry, I forgot to call. This meant I wasn't gonna get any sleep for basically 2 days, and I told him that. He didn't care. I said I've got a crash for a couple, and I would be there when I could. So I grabbed a 2-hour nap and then drove the hour there. Needless to say, I crashed at 3 a.m. and I was caught the next day by boss. I didn't get everything done I was supposed to get, but stuff happens. Well, I got threatened with being fired, but I wasn't. I was written up for it, and everyone else that was involved told him he was wrong, but he didn't care. So 5 or 6 months of BS happened, and he decides to demote me to distribution clerk. This meant that I had to separate thousands of pages of reports and get them to the right person, and do payroll. Of course, I wasn't trained to do this, and mistakes happened. So here's where the fun begins. He calls me into his office, left the door opened, and he just yelled at me. He told me that I wasn't to separate or distribute the reports. Just pull them off the printer and let someone else that wasn't a total screw-up do it. I realized something then, and then smiled to myself and said for him to put that in writing. And the idiot did. The letter with the company logo stated that under no circumstances was I to distribute the reports. I then said okay, and happily went on my way. He was going on vacation that night, and I knew the crap storm that was gonna happen, since that night, a Thursday, the last day of the month, was the night the paychecks were printed. Well, the difference with paychecks is that they were run through a special machine that separates them. There were about 500 or so, and then they would be placed in envelopes by the payroll department. They picked up first thing in the morning. So about 10 minutes before they were to arrive, I got my coffee and Danish and waited. The payroll clerk says to me, "Where's the checks?" I point and say, "Over there," and then point to a 2-foot pile of papers. The payroll clerk says, "I need them separated," to which I say I can't do it. And of course I was asked, why not? To which I reply, boss told me not to. I then show her a copy of the letter as I took the original home, and she says, we'll see about that. She then went and got boss's underling, who was actually a decent person. Underling says to me, "Hey, what's going on?" I reply, boss told me in no uncertain terms that under any conditions am I to separate or distribute any reports, so I'm not. Underling knew the reasons, and he says, I'll authorize it. I reply, I'm not letting you take the heat for it. Just call him and get permission. Once that's done, it'll take 5 to 10 minutes to do it. He tells me okay, reaches for the phone, tries to call him, and no response. He went hunting, and there were no phones. I said, sorry, won't do it. Then finished my coffee, put my coat on, and went home. I told him I'd see him Monday, as I don't work Friday. I then handed him the copy of his letter and left. They did manage to separate the checks eventually, and everyone got paid. I had direct deposit, so I didn't care. And the best part was, there was nothing they could do to me as I followed my instructions to the letter. My boss got in deep trouble for that, and he made it his goal to get me to quit. But I wanted unemployment, so that wasn't happening. I got fired 1 month later, and was told my goodbyes were talked about for months. About a month or so later, I wanted to say hi to the guys I worked with for 10 years, and who answers the phone? My boss. Except now, he was demoted to what was my position, and he had to work third shift and weekends. He didn't last long. I found out later where he went and realized a dear friend of mine worked there too. I got him fired. I ran into him at a street fair a year later, and the only reason I didn't rip him a new one was that he had his young son with him. I'm just too nice. Guys, I love how OP says he's too nice after basically destroying his boss's career. But hey, his boss messed with his livelihood first, so it's only fair, right? And this is why you treat others the way you'd want to be treated, because you never know when some people will go above and beyond just to see you get ruined. This happened quite a while ago. I was working remotely for a staffing agency, organizing and managing events. When I was initially hired on it, it was due to the fact that 3 employees were quitting. They all seemed to be leaving amicably to pursue other ventures, so I didn't think anything of it. They had hired myself and one other person to replace them, and everything was going fine. Over time, I start to notice little things here and there, like issues due to miscommunication between the owners, which was a married couple, and a heavy workload. A few months in, I was assaulted, and I'd been injured pretty badly. It was really difficult, obviously, but I worked remotely, so I was still able to work. I told my bosses I had this emergency and was injured, and needed to take time off. Almost immediately, one owner calls me and left an angry-sounding voicemail. I called him back and ended up having to tell him that I've been assaulted, and went to the hospital and all that. He did seem sympathetic, but near the end of the conversation, he noted that I was supposed to be managing an event that weekend, Friday to Sunday, and that they had no one else to manage it. He didn't do any of that, but his wife did. However, we always had at least 5 events we were organizing and managing at a time. I was afraid I'd get fired, so I ended up working that weekend. It wasn't so bad, but I was in a huge amount of pain. But I worked that weekend and pushed through. Shortly after that, they fired another employee and gave me her workload. Then, they chose me to do a very long-running, 2-month-plus event taking place in 2 different time zones. They initially decided the event would be split between myself and another employee, who was pregnant at the time, due to the size of the program. So while I was dealing with the assault and healing, I was also doing the majority of the workload of this event. I was also having to plan a move, put my stuff in a storage unit, and living in a long-term sublet while I looked for a place. I was also organizing other events on top of that, so there were days where I would easily work 10+ hours. Eventually, the employee who was helping me went on mat leave, so the whole program just lands on my shoulders. One day, I got reprimanded for working overtime. I explained that the workload was heavy, and since I was managing events in 2 time zones, I was having to wake up super early in the morning, like 4 a.m., to work during the day. Then take a long lunch, work some more, and then wrap up the other event, which ends in the evening, like 10:30 or 11 p.m. They basically told me I needed to manage my time better. Well, I wasn't doing well mentally or physically, so my cognitive abilities weren't the best. I was making small mistakes here and there, but nothing that was damaging or severely detrimental to the business. There were days where I would just sit there crying at my desk. It was awful. Another employee had also been reprimanded for working overtime, and she was just as swamped as I was. Eventually, one of my bosses emails me and said I was working too much overtime, and that he wanted me to work only 5 hours on days where I wasn't managing the big event. I was relieved, honestly. I was looking forward to having more time for myself so I could heal. Well, the thing is, he didn't tell his wife, the other owner, about my new hours, and she had the tendency to ramble about stuff during meetings, making them last way longer than they needed to be. One day, we had a meeting in the morning that lasted 3 hours, and it was the first day I was only to work 5 hours. After that meeting, the wife sends me messages asking the progress of some things I was working on, and then she added more things for me to do. The back and forth with her took 20 minutes. I then told her I knew I wouldn't have enough time to finish those things for the day because I only had a little over an hour and a half to complete the other tasks I'd been assigned. She had no idea what I was talking about, so I told her that her husband had reduced my hours on non-management days and forwarded her our email exchanges where he confirmed I was only to work 5 hours a day. She then got an attitude with me and she said, "Well, I'm the boss too. These are high priority things and we need you to work on them. You can go ahead and work longer today." I told her I couldn't because I had confirmed a week prior and I'd made arrangements so I was not able to work. So once I hit my 5 hours, I clocked out. I put my phone on Do Not Disturb, ignoring all the messages she was sending me. She ended up having to work on all the stuff she had given me late into the night. I just continued to follow the new schedule and they just dumped my workload onto other employees, or had to do it themselves. I eventually got fired because they basically said that was the last straw, but I was so relieved and also got unemployment benefits, even though they tried to fight it. So that's my story. Man, that does not sound like a good place to work at all, guys. Like overworked employees, owners refusing to give a crap about mental and physical health of employees. Oh boy, I've been there before, and I can tell you that it's not fun at all. Especially if you need a job like that because you're supporting a family. Like the first red flag was that 3 employees quit and they only hired 2 to replace them. And you guys know that those 3 employees were probably doing the job of like 7 people to begin with. And I'm glad OP left that place. So I'm a lawyer in Brazil, but when I was at college, I got an internship at a tribunal. I usually worked behind the scenes, dealing with paperwork and some bureaucratic stuff. It was usually a nice place to work, but occasionally the judge, who was the boss of my boss, would require some intern to help her with the hearings. Now, it wasn't unpleasant work, but more of an annoyance since we were only 8 people dealing with the paperwork of 10,000 lawsuits, which means that every time she requested someone to help her, they knew that there would be a lot of accumulated work when they got back. Also, something I need to point out about this specific judge is that she was very polite and pleasant outside of work, but at the court, she would become extremely micromanaging, especially about bureaucratic stuff that she had never had to deal with and did not understand, usually making our work take way longer than it needed to be. Also, whenever a lawyer was present, suddenly she became very rude and demanding to anyone below her. On this specific day, I'd been assigned to help her with a very long hearing. In Brazil, all the stuff's recorded, so for me, that meant taking care of the computer, taking notes, but mostly making sure that the camera was on. Well, the thing is, whenever you do these recordings, it kind of has a script that needs to be followed. First, she would tell me to start recording, and then she would present herself, telling us what case was being judged, then name the first witness and show their documents to the camera, to prove that we were questioning the right person. Only after that, she would start questioning the witness. Then the lawyers take turns doing the same. Now, I'm not sure why, but she was more annoyed with me than usual that day, and she did everything in her power to show everyone in the room that she was the boss, and I was supposed to be doing what she said without arguing. But despite that, she was talking a lot with the lawyers about trivial stuff, while waiting for some witnesses that hadn't arrived yet. Finally, everyone's there, and the hearing can begin. But for some reason, she was so distracted with the conversation that she forgot about the script, and she starts questioning the witness without doing the proper presentations and asking me to start recording. As soon as she starts questioning him, I tried to discreetly warn her, but all I could say was, "Your Honor," before she loudly shushes me without even looking in my direction. It was not at all discreet, and everyone was visibly embarrassed, including me. So I did the only thing I could in that situation, which was absolutely nothing. I couldn't start recording without the presentations, and definitely not do it in the middle of a hearing, so I just sat there and waited. After almost half an hour of questioning, she asked me to stop the recording because they would do a small recess. All I could say was, as I tried to warn you, Your Honor, the video was not recording when you started questioning him. Hearing that, she got visibly white, and she started saying, "But you should have," before realizing her mistake. She then tried looking around for support, but everyone saw the way she shushed me, and they had the look of, well, he's got a point on their faces. I don't know exactly what happened after that because they did the recess anyways, and I was sent back to my usual work and I didn't get to participate in the rest of the hearing, which was a relief because I had a lot of work to do. I don't think there was any big repercussions about this specific mistake, but I did hear a few years later that since her productivity was extremely low, and after more other serious mistakes, she got demoted. She's an auxiliary judge today, which means she can help other judges, but she's not responsible for dealing with lawsuits on her own. And that, my friends, brings us to another end of our /malicious compliance, guys. I hope you enjoyed today's stories. If you did, hit that thumbs up, and if you're not subscribed, consider subscribing so you don't miss these crazy stories. And if you missed the last episode on the channel, it's in our /entitled People episode, where a psycho customer demands OP leave her husband for him because he's the customer. It's such a wild story, so go check it out if you haven't. And myself and Stevie Boy will see you guys in the next one. We love you.